Dear students, welcome back to one more session on public international law. And in today's class and in this video, we will be discussing about the concept of state succession, one more important chapter in your unit 3 of the syllabus. So in today's session and in this video, we will be looking into the introduction and meaning of state succession, which includes the meaning, its definition, and difference between state succession and state government. These are the three important things which will be looked into in this session. Other important topics on which you can expect frequently the questions being asked, they include theories of state succession, and further one more important topic is that of effect of state succession on rights and obligations under treaty and rights and obligations under contracts. So these are few important things will be looked into. Lastly, we will be also discussing about kinds of state succession. These are important topics. First one is meaning of state succession, its a definition, and difference between state succession and succession of government. Further, we will be discussing about theories of state succession. Moving further is the kinds of state succession. These are the things which will be discussed in the 2 or 3 videos which follows this. So let us start with today's session with meaning of state succession as such. So meaning and introduction. So it is state succession is a process or is an act which involves change of sovereignty over a territory. We have been discussing about the concept of state sovereignty. We have been discussing about territorial jurisdiction. So whenever in a given territory, if there is change in the sovereignty over the territory, then we say that there is succession of state, and it involves acquisition and loss of territory. That is the most important aspect of this concept of state succession, that is acquisition and loss of territory. What is Who is going to lose and who is going to acquire? In this regard, first thing is loss is to the state which formerly enjoyed sovereignty. Let us take the example of India. British India. Britishers, they had sovereignty over the Indian territory and Pakistan, Bangladesh, what we have today. So over all this territory, Britishers had the sovereignty. So after 1947, India was divided into two nations, and one was made Pakistan, one territory was made Pakistan, the other was made declared as India. So in this regard, the what happened to the sovereignty of Britishers had a sovereignty earlier over this territory. On August 15, 1947, they lost their sovereignty. So Britishers had lost their sovereignty, and who got it? The sovereignty was gained or acquired. There has been an acquisition of sovereignty by a state to which the sovereignty was passed wholly or partly. Of course, what is the concept is wholly passing on the sovereignty and partially passing on the sovereignty, we'll be discussing in the future once we start our discussion on kinds of state succession. There can be partial succession and universal succession. What is that and how it works, we'll be discussing there. So this is the brief meaning or the general meaning of this term state succession. State succession involves change of sovereignty over a territory, where the state which was earlier enjoying the sovereignty is going to lose its sovereignty over the territory, and some other state will take over the sovereignty of the territory. That is considered as a succession of state. Moving further, uh, before proceeding further, one thing which I would like to mm, inform you or bring it to your notice at this point of time is the controversies around codification of this laws dealing with state succession at the international level. Efforts are made to codify the law as to how this state succession is going to happen. What are the rights and obligations which are going to be succeeded by the successor state from the predecessor state? These are the two terms which will be frequently being used here afterwards: predecessor state and successor state. Predecessor state is the state which has lost its sovereignty over a territory, and successor state is a new state which has acquired sovereignty over a particular territory. In that sense, we will be using these two terms, predecessor state and successor state. Moving further is regarding this what we call as definition. As I have been telling you about the controversies around this codification of this law dealing with state succession, efforts are made in 1978. After this, and in 1978, Vienna Convention was made, through which they tried to codify the law dealing with state succession. And even before that, efforts were made after decolonization, the era of decolonization during 1940s and 50s, where almost 1950s, 60s, and 70s, where most of the territories have been decolonized and there emerged many independent states. So, to what extent new states is going to succeed to its previous regime? Questions were raised. In this regard, efforts were made to codify the international law dealing with state succession, but those efforts were futile. First is the era of decolonization, and second one is de-Sovietization. Even that has happened after the collapse of the USSR. Many independent states emerged. Again, questions arose as to state succession, and this is one area which is filled with confusions, and it is highly politicized. These are a few important things which we should know before we proceed to this definition given by the Vienna Convention on which is dealing with the concept of state succession. Even this definition what we will be studying today is not entirely accepted. As I said, the very concept of state succession is being politicized. There is confusions, and we find innumerable practices by different states whenever there is a state succession, because it's highly sensitive a matter, and we don't find uniformity of state practices as to how it works, to what extent the successor state is going to succeed to the our rights and obligations of its predecessor state. It's highly political issue, and we find lot of differences among states regarding state practices as to how it works. So, keeping this in background, now we'll try to understand, of course, try to find out what is the definition given by the Vienna Conventions dealing with this state succession. So let us see what is that. Vienna Convention on the Succession of States in Respect of Treaties of 1978. In this convention, under Article 2, the convention tried to give a definition to this term state succession. Let us try to find out what it is. So it says that it is the replacement of one state by another state in the responsibility for international relations of territory. So there is a territory, and over the territory there is going to be some state, and what happened, that state has lost its control or its sovereignty, some other state has taken that position, and now we will be looking into the responsibilities for international relations. This definition is not talking about the rights, it only talks about responsibilities. In this regard, there are controversies. Most of the states says that it is not only going to be the responsibilities, but even rights are the subject matters of succession. And there are few theories which we'll be discussing in the future, where they are of the opinion that only rights can succeed and not applications. How and why, all these things will be studied in the future, but this is the definition given by the Vienna Convention on the succession of state in respect of treaties in 1978. So this is what the definition. So as I told earlier, this definition has not been universally accepted, because most of these people are of the opinion that it is not only the responsibilities under the international relations which are going to be the subject matter of succession, even rights are also equally important an issue as far as state succession is concerned. So that is with respect to the definition of the state succession. Moving further is succession of government. Often we get confused between succession of state and succession of government. In both the cases, definitely there is going to be change in the sovereignty, but as far as change in this sovereignty which is going to happen through succession of state, it is going to be external change of sovereignty. and one state has been there in existence, it was removed and new state came into power. Whereas it is not so in case of succession of government, where the state remains the same, sovereignty remains the same, but what is going to happen, there is going to be change in the government internally. That is considered as succession of government. So it is change of sovereignty which is purely internal. Just let us have a comparison as to the change in the state after the exit of Britishers in India and our constitution coming into existence, coming into force. There is new set of new state has been brought into existence. Whereas subsequent to this independence, we find once in every 5 years general elections are going to happen, and in the general elections new governments are going to be formed, and governments are going to succeed within the framework of constitution. Constitutional framework is there. Within that constitutional framework, there is going, as per the rules and regulations laid down in the constitution, there is going to be change in the sovereignty in the form of government. It is not going to affect the states and its identity, which remains same. Only thing is governments are going to change. It's purely internal. And what is the means of this change? It can be a constitutional or revolution. There is going to be only internal change. We can find such a thing in we cannot find out, or I cannot say how a revolution internally has led to a new succession of state in India, but I can give an illustration in Pakistan. There are many instances where there used to be army cop and army taking over the government, and again after few years they will again conduct an election and a democratic government will come into existence. Again there will be a coup, armed coup, and army takes control. This is succession of governments, but it is going to happen internally. Revolution or constitutional change. Revolution, one more example I can give to as to how there is going to be state succession through revolution. That is something which happened in China. China remained the same state as it was earlier, but it's internally there has been a change. Earlier there was a government regime which was overthrown by a revolution of this present regime of Communist Party. So that is an example of succession of government through revolution, and succession of governments through constitution, as it happens in India, where once in 5 years elections are going to happen and there is going to be a change in the government. That is succession of government. Whereas succession of state, example is exit of Britishers from India and new state being brought into existence, which we call now today as Bharat. So this is with respect to succession of government and succession of state. So new government takes up the reign of the office either through constitutional methods or through revolutions. New government takes over the reign or the control of the state, whereas state succession, it is something which is going to happen externally. So these are few important things which we should know as far as succession of government and succession of state. And in the coming session, we will be discussing about theories of state succession. There are divergent views expressed by different jurists as to how this state succession works. What are the areas on which succession takes place, how they takes place, what are not subject matters of succession. These are few controversies. As I said, this is the most politicized area of international law where we don't find uniformity and there is no consensus, and a number of state practices are there which are different from one another as per their convenience. Even those are things were said even in those theories. We'll be discussing them in greater details in the next video. With this, I will conclude this session. Thanks to all of you.